Welcome back, Wheels and Weebies, to the channel Doge, but today I'm excited to present to you the More mod for BloonsTDX. So this is a mod for the game that I happened to just discover almost by complete accident. It just so happened that someone who joined my Discord server said in their bio that they were the developer of this mod, and I'd never heard of it, but I didn't even think there were mods for this game, so I asked them about it and I tried it, and I've got to say, I'm actually quite impressed. I was expecting this mod would maybe add like 1 or 2 new towers, and if it did add like maybe more than that they wouldn't have many upgrades. But no, this mod adds a lot of new towers, and all of them, for the most part, have fully fleshed out upgrade paths and even alternate secret upgrade paths for some of them. The first tower you will unlock when you get the More mod, once you've ranked up enough, will be the Darter. You'll also unlock the Seamerang Thrower in the same level, but for now let's just talk about the Darter. That's what this video is about. The Darter, as you might have guessed, acts as a variant to the Dart Monkey. It costs only a small amount more at 250, and it trades away the respectable range of a normal Dart Monkey in exchange for the ability to fire 2 darts at once with a small cone of spread. This does make it better than the Dart Monkey in the vast majority of cases for early game defense, but I still wouldn't recommend starting with it. I would recommend starting with a Ninja or Submarines instead in most cases. A reminder to BloonsTDX players here that prior to BloonsTDX, an unupgraded Dart Monkey only had 1 pierce, not 2, and that does carry over to the Darter. Both of those darts only have 1 pierce, so it's very bad against even a small group of balloons. Like most towers, the Darter is borderline useless unupgraded, although due to its cheap cost and starting pierce of 1, spamming them unupgraded in the range of a village is a cheap option for dealing with mini-mobs. The first upgrade for the village in BloonsTDX grants all towers in its range plus 1 pierce for only 800, allowing unupgraded darters to deal double damage against group balloons. Still, this is a pretty niche option, and in most cases, yes, you should only get these if you're planning on upgrading them. So, what's the first upgrade? Well, the first upgrade is pretty self-explanatory. It's more darts. For 200, more darts will make the darter throw darts from both of his hands, meaning that it can fire 2 bursts of 2 darts in quick succession, essentially becoming like a 2-burst shot tower. This essentially doubles the damage that you're dealing compared to before for a cheaper price than the initial payment for the tower, so it's definitely cost effective. This allows it to deal enough damage to be a decent cheap counter to low tier shielded balloons. The first burst usually weakens the shield, and the second burst will almost always break the shield unless it's a very high tier shield balloon. And sometimes it will even break the shield with 1 dart and then pop the balloon with the second one, which can help slow down whatever balloon is inside it. Just remember that if you have the money for it though, the Shield Buster Engineer is almost always better than any other tower in the game for dealing with shielded balloons. I mean, it says it in the name, it's the Shield Buster, it's what it's made for. The Darter's second mandatory upgrade before you can pick a path is Laser Eye, which for 400 will give the Darter a cyborg laser firing eye that acts as a secondary attack to the Darter, similar to Wizard Fireballs. It is much slower than the main attack, but occasionally will have the Darter fire a powerful laser. It has a much higher amount of pierce than the darts and deals a full 5 layers of damage to its target, as well as being able to pop lead. This makes the Darter a specialist when it comes to dealing with a tough single target non-Moab balloon for a low cost, but don't rely on it for your lead popping power. While the laser does a significant amount of damage and can pop lead, it fires extremely slowly, meaning it can only be trusted to deal with 1 lead at a time. And sadly, there aren't many times in BloonsTDX where you'll be faced with a single strong lead balloon. You'll almost always be faced with a large group of low tier lead balloons, which the Darter will be pathetic against. Sadly, you won't run into the situation of 1 single strong lead balloon you can just deal with the Laser Eye very often. And if you do run into that situation, you probably aren't early enough in the game for Laser Eye to be a good option. So those are the Darter's mandatory upgrades. What about its upgrade paths? Well, the first path you can choose is all about turning the Darter into a cyborg with even more powerful lasers, which specialize in popping lead and dealing lots of layers of damage per shot. The first upgrade on this path, Mini Lasers, attempts to address the main problem with the laser, that being that although it is powerful for its cost, it shoots extremely slowly, making it unreliable. Mini Lasers is technically another tertiary attack added onto the laser you already have and the darts you already have, which shoots much faster than the main laser, but only deals 2 layers of damage and has 4 pierce instead, for 900. This makes the overall DPS of the tower a lot more respectable and its lead popping much more viable because of its much faster fire rate. Overall though, the tower isn't particularly impressive when you only have it at 3rd tier on this path in my opinion. The tower gets a bit more impressive once you get to its 4th tier upgrade on this path though, Nuclear Fission, which for 2,250 will greatly enhance the pierce and damage of all your weapons. That might not sound particularly exciting, but this boost is a big one. It's enough to allow the darter to crack open low-tier Moabs, but more importantly, it makes it a ceramic and brick balloon melting machine. In combination with high enough pierced towers to deal with the hordes of yellows that the brick balloons will be popped into, this darter upgrade is a respectable cleanup option. As well as that, you will need this upgrade to get the darter to deal enough pierce to be able to hurt the hard titanium aircraft. Otherwise, it'll be completely immune to its attacks because it doesn't have enough pierce. In general though, I do find it hard to find a situation in which the first path here is very useful, mostly because it doesn't really specialize in much. It deals damage, sure, but every tower deals damage, and it doesn't really deal damage in a very special way that makes it really good at a particular job. Again, if I was to say anything, I would say it's good against ceramics and brick balloons, but even then, it's not perfect against them. There are better towers in the game, and it can pop lead, but it can't pop camo. The next upgrade though really is what solidifies this tower's position as a specialist against brick and ceramic balloons, and that is the Railgun 5th tier upgrade. The 5th tier for this first path will add one final extra attack to the darter's repertoire for 7,250. This attack is a short-range, high-pierced beam that is capable of such enormous damage numbers that it instantly deletes even shielded brick balloons and static ceramics the second they touch it. This is especially handy for round 80 in normal mode, where hordes of static ceramics are sent at you and can easily catch you off guard and stun all your towers if your defense was too focused on pure Moab damage. In fairness, this tower is not a perfect solution to static ceramics, because if this tower does eventually start losing ground to the static ceramics and one of them manages to land a stun on it, once one stun is landed on this tower, it usually gets stun locked until it can't fire another bullet at them. But as long as it doesn't get forced into that stun lock, it should be able to keep up with an immense amount of static ceramics, instantly deleting them with one shot for each of them. It also gains a minor activated ability, which allows it to fire one extra powerful beam whenever you click on it. Although the impact of this isn't particularly significant a lot of the time, and I should also warn you that since this does a lot of damage and can often hit a lot of balloons, when using this against group Moabs, make sure you have good group balloon defense afterwards. When testing this in Sandbox, there were actually some situations where using this ability would get you killed in situations where if you didn't use it, you would actually live. Not necessarily because the ability's extra damage wasn't helpful, but because it popped the Moabs into massive groups of yellows, which were much faster than a ceramic would have been, and they were so tightly clumped that they maxed out the pierce of the tower and ran right to the exit. The last thing to mention here is that this tower is also very good against the big rubbery carrier, or the BRCs. You see, it's good against low-tier Moabs, but I didn't really mention that because I would expect a tower this expensive to be good against low-tier Moabs. It's decent against groups of them as well, but definitely better against groups of brick or ceramic balloons. However, the BRC has just the sweet spot of health, and of course has the advantage of spawning multiple mini Moabs, which is just perfect for this tower, and it melts them really effectively. Overall, I won't lie, as much as I'm praising this tower, I do think it's very niche. However, if you need that niche fulfilled, if you want a tower that's good against low-tier Moabs and is absolutely going to eviscerate shielded brick balloons and static ceramics, then this is your guy. As I was getting footage for this video, my plan was that this second path was going to be one of the few times in this video series I outright tell you I think this upgrade path is bad. A lot of them I might think they aren't that great, but I'll still try and cover them and talk about what I think their strengths are without trying to be too judgmental about the quality of the upgrades. For the sake of not being too quick to judge, I don't think that I have the full picture on what the most overpowered upgrades in this game are. I'm just trying to teach you how they work and what they're good for. So I would like to focus a lot of the time just on what the tower's good at. Even if overall I think it's a bit of a weaker tower, I'll still talk about what it's good at. And I was initially planning this might be one of the few times I would have to say this tower's basically not good at anything. But the 5th tier on this path really turned me around eventually after I used it a bit more. We'll get to that later though. For now, let's cover the 3rd tier, the Darterer. Ha, I get it. The Darterer upgrade will make it so the Darter Monkey is Darterer. Essentially, it will increase the amount of darts it throws per throw, which includes the throw from both hands. It will increase the amount of darts from 2 to 4. As well as that, it will increase the pierce of the darts. That means that these things have 2 pierce. So even with the pierce increase, they still have a very low amount of pierce. This is a lot of the reason why I definitely misinterpreted this upgrade path for a long time. Typically, any kind of upgrade path that fires a whole bunch of stuff is something that's made to be dealing with groups of balloons. Just think of stuff like Operation Darkstorm for the Ace. or Plasma Super Monkeys. And so I expected that this was a tower that was meant to deal with group balloons, but actually that's the greatest weakness of the tower. As you can see here, even with 2 of these guys under an amplification village, granting them both plus 20% attack speed and plus 2 pierce to each dart, making them all have 4 pierce instead of 2, they don't take long to choke. Overall, this upgrade feels very weak in comparison to the other ones, and I think the only reason you'd be getting it is if you're trying to get to the 5th tier on this path. To be fair, it only costs 400, so you could definitely argue it's very cost effective, and in theory it is, but my main problem with that is that you have to buy Laser Eye before you're allowed to buy this upgrade. Considering the differences between the applications of Laser Eye and the ability to throw multiple of these darts at once, I feel like usually if you're going to buy this upgrade, then you probably don't really want Laser Eye that much, which means that I don't know if you can really call it cost effective to get this upgrade, even if it seems quite weak. So for that reason, I would consider this upgrade one of the few upgrades in the game that I would outright call bad. The 4th tier upgrade on this path is the Darterer. The Darterer picks things up a bit, upgrading you to 6 even sharper darts per throw. I presume that ups it to 3 pierce, but more importantly adds the ability to build Gatling sentry turrets that shoot, well, I assume it's supposed to be rapid fire darts considering they're called Gatling turrets, but they don't actually shoot very fast. Either way, it costs 1,150 to get that. This does finally give the tower enough firepower to deal with some of the more significant threats in the game, like high tier static balloons, thanks to the turrets soaking up stuns, smaller ceramic clusters, and with some support, it's not a bad tower against big balloon carriers. It still definitely needs support to work though. It is a little excusable though considering its low price tag, so I consider it a relatively average-ish upgrade, well, maybe a bit below average. It does just barely give you enough pierce to actually damage HTAs, but it doesn't do much damage to them at all. In fact, I don't think you would really use this to pop HTAs even if you could. So while this is certainly better than the Darterer is still a pretty bad upgrade in my opinion. The 5th tier is undoubtedly a satisfying sight to behold though, the Dartist. It's one of the cheapest 5th tiers at 3,500 and it throws 16 darts at a time, as well as building turrets that shoot bursts of 4 darts instead of just shooting a single dart, and that allows it to carpet the screen with darts, which means it's best with buffs and debuffs. Alone it struggles to manage to deal with a single BFB, but with village buffs and an out buff, it can deal significantly greater amount of damage. But that's going to be a recurring theme for this tower: support. This tower needs a lot of support to work. On its own, with no other help, this tower is awful. It still doesn't have enough pierce to deal with group balloons. You'll see it crack open Moabs, but then pathetically attempt to pop the insides and fail. This thing dies more often to group yellows and pinks than it does to ceramics, static ceramics, shielded brick balloons, Moabs, any of that. It's the grouped balloons that kill it, just the normal balloons. Really sucks for a 5th tier to be struggling so much against just simple balloons, especially when it's firing 32 darts every single time it shoots, as well as building 4 burst dart sentry turrets. Oh, and did I mention yet? This tower cannot see camo or pop lead. Yes, even though we got it to 5th tier, it still can't do either. Now, to be fair, that's somewhat excusable, because in this game, thankfully, MIB only costs about half as much as it usually does, so it's not too hard to get this done under an MIB village, and if you get this under an MIB village, in combination with out buffs for increased attack speed, I won't lie, this actually is capable of some decent DPS, only counterintuitively, it's to single targets, not to groups of balloons. Still though, after all that, it seems like this tower is pretty bad, right? Well, watch this footage here. I've got 2 of them in fairness, but remember that this 5th tier only costs 3,500, so it's actually cheaper than some 4th tier upgrades in this game. Also remember that in this game, the Zomg is the biggest balloon in the game, so you can essentially think of this like the equivalent of a BAD in BTD6. And you can see, just with that amplification village and 1 out buff, those 2 darters take down the Zomg. The only thing they can't deal with is the insides. Again, they can't do anything to group balloons. But in terms of actually popping it open in the first place, they do an amazing job, especially for their low cost. And in fairness, you'll be getting a village almost every game, so you could make a strong argument that the Dartist is actually a very good 5th tier to use. The only issue is that you kind of need both an amplification and a MIB village. MIB obviously to allow it to pop camo and lead, an amplification so that's actually getting the maximum buffage it can get, because it really needs it. As I mentioned, Those village buffs are crucial to these things. That could be considered a bit of a waste of money, but then in fairness, that's kind of helped by the fact that the tower itself is very cheap for a 5th tier. So I'm not gonna lie, I went into this just very prepared to just absolutely badmouth this path and say that it's terrible, which was what I was expecting to do, because every time I had used it prior to this, it seemed awful. After really going out my way to try and make it work, I have seen the potential use in it, and I do think it's very cost-effective single target damage, provided it gets the support it desperately needs. Still, overall, I would have to say that the middle path is probably the weakest one in total, considering that both the upgrades before it are underwhelming and don't really have many applications. The Darter's 3rd path, though, is the one I would recommend for most situations. Overall, I consider the Darter Tower to be one of the weaker towers and less useful ones in total when it comes to the whole of the selection of new modded towers in this mod. Although I have some praise for the left path, it's mostly because of the niche of melting higher tier non-Moab class balloons in clumps, and even then it can be overwhelmed if they are bombarded for long enough, or if tightly grouped yellows or pinks run under it and eat up all its PS. That being said, if I were to use the Darter seriously, it would certainly be for its 3rd path, which allows it to learn and apply multiple new status effects with its attacks, as well as deal with both camo balloons and lead balloons easily. The first upgrade on this path is Stati Darts, or Stati, or I don't know how you pronounce it. Stati Darts will add multiple random effects to the darts thrown and grant the Darter camo detection for 660. That is pretty good. When I first saw this description, it didn't mention the camo detection, it just mentioned the random status effects, and I was expecting this to be a pretty awful upgrade. Considering it only costs 600, I was expecting the status effects would be very minor and not very important, and it'd be really frustrating that it would be random and the randomness would screw you over constantly. However, when it says random status effects, it means random between a pick of 3, which for one really reduces the randomness because you're already shooting 2 darts at a time every time, and technically you're shooting them in 2 quick bursts, which means you're shooting 4 darts at a time. So if there's one status effect you really need, you have a very high chance of getting it every single time you shoot a volley of darts. 3 status effects you can get. One of them is that it will hit the balloon that it targets with corrosive glue. The other one is that it will freeze balloons. And the final one is that the dart will explode like a bomb. An interesting thing about all of these is that they all pop lead, all 3 of those possibilities. So essentially, this is one of the cheapest options in the game for getting camo lead defense. As well as this, it's also helpful considering that freeze is one of the options, that both of them can pop frozen balloons as well. Combined with the corrosive glue, as long as Stati Darts doesn't have its pierce maxed out, it will often be able to completely stun lock balloons trying to get past it until it can deal with them, or the towers around it can deal with them if you have some support around it. And for such a cheap tower, that's pretty good. If you're trying to place a tower to hold over your defense while you build your farms, and you're concerned about camo balloons and lead balloons, and you want to deal decent against group balloons as well, but you also want to be good against single target strong balloons, this is a very nice middle spot. The only thing that the Stati Darts isn't really good against is really just group balloons, but even then it can deal with group balloons relatively well, since the freeze is an area of an effect, and of course the explosion effect is good against group balloons. Probably the only thing that really screws with Stati Darts is static or shielded balloons, because shielded balloons or static balloons cannot be hit with glue or frozen or have any kind of status like that applied to them until the shield is broken. The only tower in the game that even comes close to as cost-efficient defense that can see both camo and lead is the Wizard Tower, which is already a particularly good early game defense tower, but sometimes the Stati Darts will still beat out the Wizard. They cost about the same amount, and the Wizard is better against group balloons, but certainly not as good against strong, small amounts of balloons. Things ramp up quickly on this path though, with the 4th tier upgrade, the Elementalist, costing more than the actual 5th tier from the last path, the Dartist, which only cost 3,500. This upgrade costs 5,500, but for good reason. This upgrade has the Darter Monkey learn many kinds of new magic. Now when I first heard this, I also didn't get a good impression of this new upgrade. I thought, okay, it's going to learn some cool new magic attacks, whatever. Is that going to be worth 5,500? I imagine the magic attacks are going to be kind of useful tools, but I don't think they're going to deal so much damage that they're going to be worth 5,500. So, I don't know, I don't like the sound of this. And then I got the upgrade. I did not expect the amount of new attacks the Darter earned. Keep in mind that this is all under the same idea that these are simultaneous attacks. all of these new attacks I'm going to list do not at all take away from the attack speed of the attacks we already have, the laser eyes and the darts. Those still fire at the same rate, but then at the same time, the tower is also able to fire wizard magic bolts, fireballs, dragon's breath, lightning auras, whirlwinds. It's able to raise the dead and summon skeleton monkeys that throw bones at the balloons, and it summons more of them the more balloons die within its range. And it even learns something that the wizard doesn't have in this game as far as I'm aware, that being an ice shuriken, which it throws every now and then, which not only freezes balloons on contact, but when it breaks, it shatters, it shoots out 6 ice shards when it lands, which also can go and pop even more balloons. Each of these attacks on their own is not worth anywhere near 5,500 despite their wide range of utility, but all of them combined constantly in effect simultaneously is a massive power spike, and with all their different specialties, gives you a tower that is basically weak to nothing. It can pop camo, it can pop lead, and any other kind of things like good against group balloons, good against single target. It kind of covers from how it has so many different kinds of attacks, while stuff like the ice shuriken and stuff like the darts themselves would be better against single targets. Of course, things like the dragon's breath, the fireball, the whirlwinds, those are going to be good against more groups of balloons. It's an amazing tower for covering your bases. Its only weakness is shielded balloons, since they're immune to all the debuffs it will apply until their shield is broken. So combining this tower with a shield buster engineer should make for a very reliable defense. The only real downside to this upgrade is, of course, it is indeed very costly, and for good reason. To assess whether the cost is worth it, I think you have to think about why you're getting this, and I think that it should be usually the answer is as a bridge to get to your late game. Typically, although there are variations on the formula, your late game in BloonsTDX is going to be consisting of one of 2 towers or both of them. You are probably going to be placing either multiple Sun Worshippers or multiple Apaches, because these are both the most powerful towers in the game when it comes to late game, and both of them conveniently cost about the same amount. They both cost around 17,000. The Sun Worshippers cost 16,500, and the Apache costs 17,900. With that in mind, I would say that this upgrade for the most part is something you only really want to buy if you think you are going to need it to be able to survive to get to your Apaches or Sun Worshippers, or a defense where it's so that you can build your farms up while you save up for that. If you already have enough money to start building Apaches and Sun Worshippers, then this probably isn't worth it. That being said though, considering the cost of these things, those towers usually cost about triple the amount of this. So I don't think it's unrealistic you'll be in situations where you don't have enough money to get those towers and you need a bridge tower to get you safely to there without letting you die. And I think this is going to be very good at fulfilling that role without having to get you having multiple towers all across the map because, oh, well, I got this tower but it doesn't cover camo, oh, but I got this tower but it doesn't cover lead. Again, this tower really has all bases covered except shielded balloons, and you can very easily deal with that with a single engineer. The final upgrade, though, for the Darter's third path is the Druid. And once again, it was another one that surprised me. All 3 of the upgrades on this path, when I read the description, I thought sounded like they would be bad, and then suddenly turned around and surprised me and turned out to be very good. The Druid will turn the Darter into, well, a Druid, which is even more powerful at magic, although the difference to your magic isn't very noticeable. What is noticeable is that your skeleton monkeys will work the same way, except they are now replaced with scythe-throwing reapers. Again, they will still summon more of them if more balloons are popped in the range of the tower, and summon less of them if balloons aren't being popped in the range of the tower. But the monkeys being summoned, instead of just being these little skeleton monkeys which just throw little bones, which is only really a small damage boost, they will now be these reapers which throw scythes that work like boomerangs and attack extremely quickly with big hitboxes that are able to hit any type of balloon. Each one of these scythe-throwing reapers can essentially be thought of like a perma-charge from BTD6, only one that can see camo and pop lead. And you can have multiple of them out at once. In fact, you can have a lot more than just a couple out at once, as long as you're getting it all charged up. In combination with the new ability, which allows you to instantly spawn in 4 more reapers whenever you want, as long as the ability's up, you can have up to 9 reapers on the screen at once. And again, that's kind of comparable to like having 9 perma-charges in BTD6. It's really powerful. And all of this is for 16,700. You see, that's the reason why I was skeptical of this upgrade at first, because just reading the description saying that, oh, okay, the skeleton monkeys are now reapers. Oh, cool. I guess they're stronger than normal, I guess, by a bit. And seeing the price tag at 16,700, more expensive than a Sun Worshipper, I was thinking, you're never going to use this tower. You're just going to use Apache or Sun Worshipper instead. And I'm not going to lie, this thing does have quite stiff competition between those, but it's one of the few towers in the game that does actually compete successfully with those. I would still say on most maps you'd probably rather get a Sun Worshipper or an Apache. However, I wouldn't say it's at the point where every map that's what you should do. Actually, the Druid sometimes beats them out. In fact, a single Apache isn't quite capable of dealing with Zongs. If I send a Zong on this beginner map, this Apache won't manage to kill it before it reaches the exit. It will deal a good amount of damage and it will crack it open just before it leaves, but one on its own is not enough. Even though 2 or 3 Apaches will usually be enough to solo an entire game, one alone isn't enough. One Druid on its own, though, is enough to kill a whole Zong. The only problem is it's conditional. It's under the condition that the Druid is getting pops while it's attacking the Zong by attacking other smaller balloons around it. Now that's the only problem, because then round 90 becomes a big issue. Round 90 is the last round of the game in normal mode, and it just sends spaced Zongs at you, and there's no balloons in between, meaning that when the Zongs come round, if you are playing on normal difficulty and you're not prepared for round 90, then this guy will not deal enough damage because he won't have enough Reapers out, and then when he does pop the Zongs, he'll get a massive burst of Reapers, but then those Reapers will run out before you probably kill the next Zong, and then you're out of luck. Those Reapers are gone until that next Zong is dead, but that's going to take much longer. Now you only have 1 Reaper at a time. So that's the main reason why the Sun Worshipper and Apache still probably beat this tower out on average. However, this is a really powerful late game tower if it is one of the few towers that can even compete with them in the late game. Again, provided you are getting other balloons to pop while this thing gets to attack other things, it is stupid powerful. And usually you get more money than you need to before round 90 anyway, so the fact that this thing crumbles to round 90 might not be a problem. I actually expect that this tower will be very useful in normal games a lot of the time as something to get before you get your first Sun Worshipper or Apache, where you get one of them, and then once you have one of them you switch over to getting Apaches or Sun Worshippers. You should have enough money to get both of them.